Here in the 21st century, the Christian church continues to find itself wrestling with basic philosophical logic and modern science. However, many Christians keep a strange ace card tucked up their sleeve that is often pulled out and played when confronted with facts and reason that firmly oppose their beliefs. Before I identify this ace card, let me first make a few observations concerning this subject. Christians generally love what facts and knowledge provide for them. Cell phones, cars, hot water, refrigerators, life-saving medicine, light bulbs, and televisions. But they can become very uneasy when modern advancements in knowledge crosses paths with their faith. From day one, the church has been active in this dilemma and has designed several ways of being impenetrable to facts that oppose them. The first card they will often lay down while wrestling against knowledge is to suggest that the devil is a supremely intelligent being that tricks us. Even when the believer relies on knowledge for every other area of their life, when it opposes their faith, knowledge suddenly becomes the devil's attempt to mislead them. When a Christian is backed into a corner with no escape, and they need even a stronger excuse to hold their faith, many believers will draw out the ace card by referencing verses found in Matthew and Luke, which instruct the Christian to become like a child. Though they misrepresent these verses, nonetheless, many times I have presented Christians with overwhelmingly difficult questions, and they inform me of these scriptures. What I find ironic is this. In regards to operating any other department of their life, these Christians will fully disagree with this logic or even advise against it. I can tell my child, a 6-year-old, almost anything, and he will believe me. I find this ace card to be a very odd card to play. God bestows us with intelligence and then asks us not to use it? Christians use knowledge and intelligence every day to pay bills, raise kids, and navigate a motor vehicle. If they did not use knowledge or daily facts about reality, their life would soon become a mess or a tragedy. Surely they cannot navigate a successful adult life operating like a child. Why would they believe their religious beliefs can earn a pass from becoming an adult? I believe the very first leaders of the Christian faith encountered many logistical problems, struggled with a lack of evidence, and felt obligated to provide scapegoat answers for their followers who encounter these people who ask intelligent questions. The best excuse they could muster up is, "Ye people of intelligence are deceived by an even greater intelligence. Knowledge is from the devil." I must give credit to the theologians who came up with this genius method to dumb down a congregation, or equip them with tools to believe almost any unverifiable, bizarre, or miraculous claim in which the weight of facts oppose. With these standard cop-out statements, early Christians essentially overcame the intelligence problem and have remained immune to this day by laying down such classic excuses. The struggle against common knowledge and intelligence was so intense within the very first Christian community that the issue had to be addressed in a letter specifically aimed at repelling intelligence.
Take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one.
When we read into these texts, we will begin to uncover the true nature behind faith, as an attempt to shield oneself from intelligence. Bertrand Russell stated a very interesting observation when he said, "There is not one word in the Gospels in praise of intelligence." There are many, however, that oppose it.
From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of knowledge you shall not eat.
If you have a group of people who believe in something false or mirrors no reality in the real world, what do you expect their attitude towards knowledge would be? Certainly not a positive one. In the book of Luke, Jesus is quoted saying,
I praise you, Father, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned.
A letter to Timothy says,
Avoid worldly and empty chatter and the opposing arguments of what is falsely called knowledge.
In other words, it is not good to talk about life or debate smart people. He goes on to say that those who entertain knowledge will lose their faith. Wow, now that is rather revealing. If you exercise intelligence, you will lose your faith. Another letter written by Paul says, the wise are fools. Paul has resorted to name-calling. Name-calling is always a tactic used by those who cannot hold a solid defense. It's a self-protection method that we refer to today as mocking. Paul also wrote,
I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside.
Paul was hostile. Christians were clearly in a defensive position against intelligence. Knowledge and intelligence becomes a natural enemy and threat to all things that are fable. The book of Colossians says, See to it that no one takes you captive according to the thinkers and principles of the world, but only think according to Christ. Or, in other words, be completely close-minded. Paul also wrote,
God was pleased to save those who believe through the nonsense of our preaching.
What these verses are revealing, without saying it, is that even in Paul's day, smart people were not believing these stories because they lacked agreement with reality. The New Testament clearly paints for us a real struggle. A battle against knowledge and intelligence speaks volumes about what this faith was dealing with during its conception. They had no choice but to fabricate cop-out statements such as, knowledge is of the devil, God is a mystery, or you must become like a child. These positions not only guard a believer from the devastating blows of an opponent, but they intertwine with an even deeper psychological trait that may be more resilient than any of these surface-level excuses: the human brain. When a believer is presented with facts contrary to their tightly held beliefs, caving in is not an option. Jasmine West said it well. We want the facts to fit our preconceptions. When they don't, it's easier to ignore the facts than to change the preconceptions. Even if empirical proof is revealed before their very eyes, they cannot immediately abandon a long-held or cherished belief. Religious faith lies safely behind an uncompromising psychological firewall. It is almost as if the brain will not allow a believer to switch from hot to cold instantly. Adjusting the brain to foreign information or new revelation takes time, and it is a psychological process. Letting go of a long-held conviction will never happen immediately. A believer will wiggle and adjust their beliefs before letting them dissolve. A 17th century historian named Voltaire said, "You cannot free the fools who venerate their own chains." This is why the death of a cherished religious leader, such as Jesus' execution, will not end a passionate mission, but oftentimes fuel it and reinterpret it. The scientific term for this phenomenon is called cognitive dissonance, defined as sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable. Because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, reinterpret, fabricate, and ignore or deny whatever doesn't fit with the core belief. Cognitive dissonance intimately bonds with confirmation bias, whereas a believer will also avoid all sources of information that do not agree with his or her beliefs, and only seek out or welcome the sources that they are in agreement with. As a former Christian, my faith was not only held securely behind this firewall, but it had even further psychological implications. It was also a comfort blanket, and one that I held on to for a very long time. I remember a time when I would say, "I'm not sure what I believe, but I cannot reject Jesus." Even though it began to make perfect sense that what I believed was not factual or even believable, it still required years before I was comfortable admitting to myself or to others that Jesus, the Godhead, is not reality. The very first time I admitted openly that I do not believe was a clarifying moment for me. I had finally dissolved these intense psychological barriers. So what exactly is this faith that believers hold so securely? The most common way in which we identify faith is in combination with risky moves. When we get into a motor vehicle and drive, we use faith that the other drivers are concerned for their own lives and will drive accordingly. Unfortunately, faith can never assure that we are correct. Uncertainty is the very premise of faith. We make plans for our future, having faith that we will be around to live it, but there is no guarantee we will wake up tomorrow. There is no absolute in faith. Christy Gleason wrote, "Faith is by definition belief without evidence. Under what sensible rationale could believing something despite the lack of evidence be considered a good thing?" Furthermore, a religious faith can be a very slippery slope, leading to the fringe of human imagination. Religious faith can fabricate itself around strange or miraculous theologies that may not have any mirror to the realities we experience in real-time life. A requirement to exercise religious faith is due to the inherent lack of credentials. Otherwise, faith would not be so concerned with constant reaffirming. In order to accept an unrealistic communication with an imaginary being, or continue faith in unsubstantiated or unrealistic stories, we are required to exercise it daily. Christians will then take this even a step further by saying, in order to get into heaven, you must become like a child. Many children truly believe that a tooth fairy brings them money when they place a tooth under their pillow. We know this is not a reality. This kind of childlike faith is a willingness or an eagerness to be ignorant or fooled. Having said this, I truly believe that faith among believers is much weaker than most would like to acknowledge or admit. In the very depth of our humanity, even among the faithful, there seems to be a deep place inside of all of us where logic and reality overrules. If every Christian truly believed deep down in the heart of logic, they should be more excited to receive a deadly injury or disease, knowing that they will soon be in a blissful heaven. Every loved one's death, including their very own children, should be a celebration accompanied with exceeding joy, because they would know without a doubt that their loved one is in an amazing, blissful place with Jesus. This is never the case to be seen. At the end of the day, Christians will go through the most horrifying medical procedures, surgeries, heart bypasses, rake up huge medical bills on their families, and endure excruciating medical hardships in order to hang on to life with the very last grip of their ability. The death of a loved one is just as agonizing as it is for everyone else. Experiencing this divine heavenly ideology is completely unsubstantiated and embellished by all who practice it. Most Christians and believers of other faiths do fear death because a deeper subconscious is unbiased and knows that there is no real evidence to support anything they have been brainwashed into believing. Those who do not fear death because of their religious convictions are of a small minority who are truly lacking in sensibility and observational skills. In my personal experience, a secularist view of death seems to be more comforting and less confusing, without any fear of two roads, one to hell or one to heaven, and did I make it? Christians will often say, well, why not have faith? If it's not true, you have nothing to lose. And if it just so happens to be true, you will be saved. I reject this idea of practicing faith as some sort of spiritual insurance plan for my soul. I believe in having a stronger character and more virtue than that. What a silly religion and a shallow God if this method of faith could even be effective. Wouldn't God be able to see through this faith just in case policy? The other problem with this method of faith as an insurance plan, a just in case, is that it assumes one has selected the correct God. Should we believe in all of these religions in order to have a strong afterlife insurance plan? I no longer believe in Christian theology because of the delusion, lies, deception, ignorance, and the division created by it. I stand strongly against these characteristics, and I find it difficult to support any delusion or psychosis, however benign it may appear to be today. Nor do I believe that faith is completely harmless. I remember a friend of mine back in high school was kicked out of his Christian home due to the repeated offense of bringing home rock and roll music. Luckily, I was able to enjoy AC/DC for those about to rock. My younger brother recently shared his concerns with me about his boss having very close ties to a Christian church, and that if he doesn't continue attending the church every Sunday and pray with the congregation, his job will be severely compromised. I refer to these behaviors as the us and them scenario that religious faith creates. Religious faith can produce great division among friends, individual families, and even nations. Many of my followers have commented to me that they fear sharing my videos on their Facebook page because they have family members that might disown them or shame them. This kind of faith is not deserving of any kind of respect. Stay strong and wise, my friends. There is a lot of delusion out there.